This is something that we've seen in terms of the past 6 weeks of this war, these long-standing demands of the U.S. You talked about the fact, and Tim talked about the fact, that perhaps it was unreasonable to believe that in 21 hours of negotiating here in Islamabad, we were going to see an agreement to end this war. Diplomacy takes time. That's something that when you talk to people who have spent their careers at the State Department or in foreign policy, at the White House, National Security Council, these kind of deals take time to develop and to craft. The JCPOA, Joint Comprehensive Agreement, during the Biden administration, that was a 2-year painstaking negotiation, and these negotiations typically involve a kind of a give and take. Each side has to make some concessions to get to an agreement. And so when you look at the demands from the Trump administration, it's not apparent, at least not publicly apparent, what they are conceding to Iran as part of these negotiations, and they are really maximalist demands from the Trump administration that have not changed significantly since Geneva and the last round of talks in February, before President Trump decided, along with Israel, to strike Tehran. So that is a big question, is, in terms of this kind of, there's this idea of ripeness theory, that you get peace agreements when both sides are exhausted and are ready to make peace. It's not clear that either side, or at least that the Iranian side, is ready to make peace here. And of course, the Strait of Hormuz, they've shown demonstrated an ability in recent weeks to control it, to impact global markets, and to affect a great degree of pain on the U.S. and on Western Europe. And so the question is, will they continue to use that leverage going forward?
Yeah, that's a very good question. As Eric just reminds everybody, there's a lot of distance between these two sides when it comes to what each one is looking for. Jeff, I want to bring you in from Washington and get the Washington perspective. When you joined our show on the weekday, Bloomberg Business Week Daily, you mentioned that success in Pakistan would look like just the fact that these two parties even got together. Maybe you had the most realistic view of what a successful weekend or a successful day looked like. Do you stand by that? Was this a success because the U.S. and Iran spoke?
Well, it's not my job now to determine whether it was successful or not. What I think I said, you're right, is that the fact that they were getting together was seen as a success by both sides, but the stakes were high in terms of coming away with something. And Vice President Vance returning to Washington now without anything to deliver in terms of a successful deal, and also, I think notably, not a willingness, or at least a verbal declaration that they're going to continue high-level talks, is certainly a blow. And I think what it raises for me in terms of questions next is, what does President Trump now decide to do? He had created himself a little bit of an off-ramp here with the 2-week extension from his threats to bomb civilian infrastructure, and basically just put it all on the vice president to come home with some kind of an agreement after talks this weekend. Now he doesn't have that. So does he come back and say, all right, we're gonna re-up those threats, or does he say, okay, we don't need a deal, which, by the way, he has said repeatedly, while then couching it with other threats, or does he decide to go back to a military campaign?
Neria, I want to turn to you because one of the big outliers was Israel was not at these talks. There's also the Israeli front in Lebanon, which the U.S. said wasn't a part of the talks, and then Iran and Pakistan said should be part of the talks. And they kind of asked Israel to tone it down a bit. But you've spoken to President Trump recently on the phone. President Trump was in Florida with Marco Rubio at a UFC game. Just talk to us about where the White House is and where the relationship between the Prime Minister and the President is at this time.
So I think Prime Minister Netanyahu and President Trump, they're very much cooperating on this entire situation. But after the ceasefire, Prime Minister Netanyahu did not want to do a ceasefire with Lebanon.
Right, he said it was a separate issue.
Yeah, he said it was a separate issue, and a separate, I would say, skirmish. This is the term that he used. And then President Trump speaks with him last week, and he tells him, you need to low-key. And President Trump tells me that on a phone call, and then not a long while after my phone call with President Trump, my interview with President Trump, Prime Minister Netanyahu obeys, and he says, I'm going to start negotiating with Lebanon. But he does not end that, again, skirmish. He continues with the blows, but he goes low key. I mean, he's not doing that.
Dialing it
Beirut
down,
is more like going on southern Lebanon. And we should say Hezbollah keeps on launching rockets at Israel. Israelis are in the shelters in the past 3 days, even after the ceasefire with Iran. And this is a part of the talks in Pakistan, because President Trump says, I want those talks in Pakistan or the talks with Iran to be successful. This is why I need Israel to low key, to finish that thing with Lebanon, even for the short term, so that I can continue and have a successful deal with Iran. And this is why it's so important for President Trump.
So, Eric, I want to bring you back in here after what Neria said about what Israel is doing, because I guess my question is what it means for negotiators and how they're going to resolve this. Is anyone still in Pakistan? Are there delegations from the U.S. still there? Folks who have been on the ground or will be on the ground trying to hash this out? Or is everybody completely going back to their own countries?
Tim, at this point, our understanding is that everybody, all of the high-level negotiators from the U.S. have left for Washington. We saw reports that they had a refueling stop not long ago in Ramstein base in Germany, and that confirmation that Vice President Vance, as well as Special Envoys Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner, have all left Pakistan. But this is an important point as to what Jeff was just mentioning, which is that President Trump has said he doesn't need an agreement here. But at the same time, Iran has shown an ability to cause this pain for the American economy. And President Trump needs to respond to constituencies, to voters. He's an election in November, and he has to be responsive to those constituencies in a way that certainly the regime in Tehran, repressing, killing tens of thousands of protesters, is not responsive to its citizenry and to its constituency. And so that's a challenge, for a political challenge for President Trump, is the domestic political dynamic, the impact of this war, and those kinds of considerations. So that's something that suggests, a lot of analysts I've been talking to have been saying that they don't think that if this peace negotiation that we've seen begin in Pakistan this weekend, if this fails, that they're necessarily going to just automatically go back to the military option. There are political considerations here as far as how he goes forward, the promises by both President Trump and Vice President Vance to avoid the kind of forever wars that they criticized from their predecessors. And so there's that political pressure to not necessarily go back to exactly the place that we were 1 week ago.
Jeff, I also want to ask you, the other thing that was missing from any of the vice president's, I think he took like 3 questions. It was a pretty short press conference.
We played almost the whole thing.
Literally, yes.
Yeah.
He didn't mention the Strait, which seems like a big deal. And we've got some sound of the president talking about it on Friday that I want you to listen to really quick.
The Strait will open up. If we just left, the Strait's going to, otherwise they make no money. So the Strait's going to open. But what we have is no nuclear weapon, but we'll open the Strait anyway. Don't forget, we don't use the Strait. Other countries use the Strait. So we do have other countries coming up, and they'll help out, but we don't use it. It won't be easy. It won't be, I would say this, we will have that open fairly soon.
Jeff, give me your read on the fact that the president was not at these negotiations, was at a UFC fight, and seems to just be saying, he's moved on from the Strait. The Strait will handle itself. I think that regional allies would probably dispute that. Do you think the president is trying to move on from this? And is there a worst-case scenario for Europeans and some of our Asian allies that the U.S. could leave without resolving the Strait, and it could be in an even worse situation than it was before this conflict started?
Absolutely. I think that scenario is highly possible, but I don't think it's only worst case for Europe. I think it's also got major economic and political ramifications for the United States, despite the fact that the president plays down or likes to emphasize that the U.S. doesn't use that waterway for a lot of its energy needs. The U.S. is connected to the global economy, and if the rest of the economy and the rest of the world is affected by it, then it's going to have ramifications here too, and those ramifications turn political if the gasoline prices in this country stay high. So the president has been giving mixed messages about the Strait of Hormuz, just like he's been giving mixed messages about the war generally, about whether he needs a deal or whether he doesn't, about whether he's going to strike again or whether he's not. And that's just that's just how Donald J. Trump operates. It makes it difficult to figure out if you're an analyst or if you're a reporter or if you're the market. And I think those are the questions that we'll have to try to get answers to in the coming days. But I don't think it's as simple as he's trying to make it in that quote.
Yeah.
In fact, I think one of the biggest pieces of political damage to him could end up being people concluding that things are actually worse for the United States as a result of this war, both in terms of the Strait of Hormuz and in terms of the lack of visibility on Iran's nuclear program going forward.
Neria, just 20 seconds. The appetite for Israelis for a conflict such as this to continue. What is it after being mired in conflict for almost 3 years?
Israelis want this issue to end. They want the Iranian nuclear weapon to be resolved. And, you know, my first phone call interview with President Trump after the war started, he told me no other leader could have done that. And I think that's true. History proves that. And now he has the mission to try and solve this, maybe forever, potentially forever. But the Iranians are lying in the negotiating rooms. And this is why Witkoff, Kushner, and J.D. Vance were not, I would say, pleased with the way they acted in the negotiating room. And this is why they had to wrap it all up and say, we're leaving a draft here, and we're not going to continue negotiating face-to-face. You have to give us a full answer, and then we're going to try and see where it goes. And I feel like President Trump wants it solved. I think that he's hands-on.